Good morning, YouTubers. And episode 12 today is labeled Hospitalization, or in former years, institutionalization, going to the funny farm, being committed, any number of phrases and words and descriptions, which none of us would want to have associated with ourselves. But we do live in the 21st century now, and hospitalization for mental illness is not uncommon. And so I thought, since I've been in there twice in the last 5 years, I would share a few thoughts on this. So here are some just random things to know about it. You obviously cannot get into the hospital without being entered by your physician, usually a psychiatrist, unless you go through emergency. And it's pretty clear to the psychiatric nurse or someone from that department that you do require or could require some necessity of supervision and structured help. Now, this will vary from hospital to hospital and from health region to health region, so I can only speak to what I've seen so far. But there were two situations where I wound up in the hospital, and it wasn't nearly as freakish as I had expected. So here are just some random things that I observed over my 2 stays. The first stay was prearranged by my psychiatrist, and his primary concern was I was having suicidal thoughts, that the medications that he had attempted were not sufficiently beneficial, and that he wanted a second opinion. So he asked me if I would like to go into the psychiatric ward, where I would be under the care of a different doctor. Not him, a different doctor, but a team of people, including psychologists, social workers, psychiatrists, etc., as well as 24/7 observation and all this kind of stuff would be there. So I agreed to it and voluntarily went in, and I think I went in for about 10 days. It was just leading up to Christmas, as I recall, that year. This is like 3 or 4 years ago. So here are some things just to be aware of. One, you're not a freak show for going in there. I was markedly surprised at how normal all the other residents were, for the most part. I mean, yeah, there were a few that you could definitely tell were there for good reason. But by and large, I had a semi-private room. My roommate was a very kind gentleman, retired, suffering from depression, going through regular ECT treatments, this type of thing. It had a structure to it, which falls right in line with all of the tips I've given you in previous episodes. You're woken at a certain time of the morning. We had a group meeting around 9 a.m., and it was basically discussing what current events were in the newspaper for the day. And then they would take us out on a supervised walk. Sadly, both times that I was in the hospital, it was in the winter, and the hospital's up on a big hill, so it was a windy, cold experience. But for smokers like me, hey, didn't really matter. So anyway, and then they would have 2 or 3 different types of therapies that they would go through. So initially, on my first visit, I was given a psychological assessment of sorts, which came back with shocking news. I was highly anxious and prone to depression. Didn't know that before I went in, but at least the survey said that's what I had. And then the new doctor adjusted my medications somewhat, introduced a new tranquilizer, Seroquel, which let me tell you, that one knocks you right out, in addition to the ones that I was on. But that was really the only adjustment made there. Other programs and activities that they had generically scheduled, either every day or 2 to 4 times a week, were things around helping you concentrate. So they had, well, I'll call it arts and crafts. I forget exactly what they called it, but I found it rather boring. But essentially, we went into the physiotherapy department, and in there they had a workshop set up, and you could pick your craft, be it painting, be it, what did I do? I think I did some sort of stained glass window type of thing. They provide you with all the instructions. Basically, the point of it is to get your mind focused on being able to do an activity per se. They would have group sessions for members of the floor, and they would have social workers in there as well as psychologists guiding these sessions on specific topics. And as you can imagine, as in any group setting I've ever been in, the topics were wide-ranging, so not necessarily always targeted to you specifically. They had exercise classes as well, to keep us active and moving, because once you go into the psychiatric ward, obviously you're not allowed just to wander, throughout the hospital or just come and go as you please. There are set hours where you are allowed out of the ward, and you have to be buzzed in and buzzed out and sign in and sign out. Typically it was more for the smokers or whatever. All of our meals were provided from the cafeteria, not half bad. I mean, you could pick off the menu what you wanted in advance, and I must say the hospital did a pretty good job of that. But for those of us that wanted to go down to the snack shop in in the lobby or whatever, there were, I think, 3 spans of time throughout the day. Morning around noon hour, and then late in the afternoon, early evening around supper hour, where you had the opportunity to go outdoors, and you could walk to a store nearby if you wanted to or whatever. But of course you needed to come back. So, and I'm just assuming there were some people that didn't have that privilege. One nice thing that they offered on both occasions I was in there was, did I want to stop smoking? And as I've told you, statistically, people suffering from mental distress are disproportionately more likely to be addicted to smoking, if not worse. So I give the hospital credit for that. They were offering free patches. Not that I took advantage of them, but nonetheless. And the staff were very, very kind, very patient. You can imagine the type of scenarios they must have to deal with. So, but for those of us in general population, so to speak, they were very good with us. We had a common room with a TV. Some people kept to themselves a lot. Others wanted a more social type of thing, so they'd hang around the lounge and watch whatever television shows they wanted to watch. We had movies available for watching for free in one of the therapy rooms in the evenings. They had a piano there for those that were musically inclined. And of course they had what I'll just simply call the lockup zone. And this was an area behind the nursing station where this was not the general population. This was the high-risk group, the suicide attempters that were rushed in from emergency, the ones that were really off the deep end, so to speak. Never did get to see the inside of it. Met a couple of people that had been released and came out of there after a few days or a week or whatever, but they were really tightly monitored and certainly didn't have the privileges that the rest of us did. So anyway, it served all purposes, and I've got to give the hospital staff credit. They were kind, they were resourceful, They were there if you needed anything 24/7. They made it as comfortable as any hospital could be. And and also, in addition to some of the other activities that I mentioned, um, I was hooked up with a social worker and a psychologist right away who were on staff at the hospital. And at least once a week, I would have one-on-ones with them. And that was highly beneficial.